So we're here with Jason Swan from Holborn Assets, and we're talking about the Golden Visa and specifically about the hotel investment route. And Jason's going to talk us through what that means, how the Golden Visa works, and answer some questions that readers of Portugalist had about it. So Jason, do you want to just tell me a little bit about yourself and about Holborn Assets and how you got involved in the Portuguese Golden Visa?
Yeah, of course, James. Well, yeah, thank you for inviting me to do a feature on your website. And yeah, happy to try and answer as many questions as I can. My name's Jason Swan. I'm one of the senior partners at Holborn Assets. And yeah, the topic for today, really, I think, James, is to cover off, like I said, the Golden Visa and the kind of different routes to the Golden Visa, and a bit of an update, perhaps, on kind of the recent announcement from the Prime Minister as well. But for those that are not familiar with Holborn Assets, my kind of day job, if you will, we work as a wealth management company. I specialise working with my clients' assets and managing their taxation and their investments and pensions and helping with the general kind of structuring of being able to enjoy Portugal. But ever more increasing topic now is people asking me about the Golden Visa. There seems to have been a real uplift in the thought of moving to Portugal from many different countries worldwide. So yeah, over recent months, James, I've become a bit more of a citizenship and residency expert rather than a financial planner. But it is the service that we offer is a relatively small part of the overall group of Holborn Assets, but it's a service designed to attain residency and citizenship via investment. And there's many different plans that we do, but Portugal is the hot topic. The Golden Visa, I think, is the #1 search term right now for Portugal. And before we go on, James, please excuse this moustache. By the way, it's not a fashion statement; it is for a good cause in Movember. Hey, let's not focus on that.
Well, maybe from another era, it would be very fashionable.
Yeah, maybe so. I'm not too sure.
So the questions are split into different categories, but we're going to start off with choosing investment, because I know when people get in touch with you, you will send them through some information about the hotel investment option, and then some of the different hotels around Portugal that people could potentially invest in. One thing that I noticed is that the two price points seem to be 280,000 euros and 350,000 euros. And I was just wondering if someone was to pick one of those, is there any difference between investing at 280 or investing at 350?
There are some key differences. Yes, just as a brief overview, when you're investing in property to get the Golden Visa, you kind of have 3 price points. For a property that is younger than 30 years old, which is deemed to be a new build property, the price point is 500,000 euros. However, if you buy a property that is over 30 years old and also going through some form of refurbishment to a certain level, that price point comes down from 500 down to 350. However, if you was to move either one of those into a low density part of Portugal, what's deemed to be low density, then you have a further 20% discount, which enables you to achieve the Golden Visa with an investment at just 280 if it meets that set criteria rather than the full 500. The difference generally between 280 and 350 is exactly that. First of all, is it in what type of property is it? Is it in a low density area? And we find, James, that our clients have different requirements. Some are looking at different price points. Some are looking to move into the property straight away. Some have no interest in even moving to Portugal for many years, treating it more as a kind of a backup plan, for example, or a second option, or perhaps thinking of the family and children coming into Europe rather than themselves. So the first thing we want to find out is what is it that attracts you to Portugal? What is it exactly that you're looking to do? And then we will make some recommendations as to the type of investment that would suit best around the budget and, of course, the plans generally for moving to Portugal or for the family. As purely as, well, just as a quick recap, James, on the 1st of January, you'll remember this year, there was some changes. I think you did a bit of a blog on that earlier this year. We did a webinar
Yep.
covering off the big change, which was that you can no longer purchase residential property in the main city centres like Lisbon and Porto and in generally the beachside towns where we find the most of the tourism. So this year, we're talking a lot more about looking at the property purely as an investment rather than thinking of somewhere where you'd like to live. Last year we were talking about whether you liked the driveway and the style of the house and the local restaurants, for example. Whereas this year now it is more often than not purely. It sounds quite harsh when I say, but it's a rather emotionless thought because you're thinking more with your head and the numbers now rather than your heart. You're thinking of a way you'd like to live. So on that basis, the main difference between 280 and 350 is generally the investment incentives. So at 280, the big plus is that you need less capital for obtaining a visa. And it's very much designed at just that. It's a very straightforward route with minimum capital to achieve a visa. And of course, after 5 years, then being able to apply for European passports. But 350, you find there's more incentives. So as an investment, you'll find that there may be more, well, yeah, exactly that, incentives. There may be, for example, a higher rental income that's paid. There may be incentives around the property taxes to be paid. With most developments, you'll find there's often an option of a buyback as well, where the developer will give you either a mandatory or an optional buyback after you've had the passport granted. But in the main, yeah, the more you spend, the more incentives there are. So it depends what's more important, whether it's lower capital or more profit.
Okay. And I guess this is somewhere where someone could benefit from speaking to a financial expert such as yourself. They can decide if they have the 350, is it better to keep some of that money back and just go for the 280 and then use that for something else potentially, or do they want to put it all into the Golden Visa Hotel and take advantage of whatever incentives there are at that price point?
Yep, spot on, James. With this, what we'll generally do at a first meeting, we'll give an overview of the different ways to the visa, the different investment routes, the different price points, and we help kind of compare those different options. And I'll try and guide, my client to what is the most suitable option. It's also worth noting, James, as well. At 280, you do actually have the option of buying an apartment where you physically own the property on the deeds. And there's also an option where you can buy a share in a hotel as well, both of which have their own kind of have their own benefits, But again, we'll talk through that in detail with our clients and to help them to understand which route to go down.
So I understand that I could, for 280 or 350, I could purchase a residential property in Portugal, assuming I can find one at the moment, or I could go down this hotel investment route. And there's obviously different benefits for both of those, particularly there might be usefulness to some people in having a residential property in Portugal, whereas some people might find that more hassle than it's worth or not something they particularly want. But just from a purely financial point of view, what are the sort of cost differences between doing this hotel investment option and a residential property such as an apartment?
There really aren't any differences, James, as far as the legal work. The legal work is very similar. There's not, one option is not more expensive than the other. In any way, really, it is more that it's very rare that someone would go for a residential property with the golden visa, and that the reason why is that one of the big plus points, as you'll know, of the golden visa compared to the D7, James, is that you don't physically have to be in Portugal to have that residency and to apply for the passports after 5 years. There is only you don't have to be here for 2 weeks every 2 years. And because of that, a lot of our clients, we generally find that they're not planning on being in Portugal straight away, or they're not going to be in Portugal all of the time. And therefore, the time that they're not here, they want to have a property that's going to be generating some income. It's going to be having some profit. Otherwise, if you had a residential property more inland, for example, and you wasn't living here, there's not going to be any tourism or any rental income to benefit from. So it's not. We generally find the deciding factor is not kind of which one costs the least or the most. It's more, what route makes more sense to go down.
Okay. And I understand another option again would be investing in a fund, which at the beginning of this year went up to 500,000 euros minimum. Is that another thing that people are weighing up when they're looking at how to get the golden visa, whether the hotel investment route is the right option for them, or possibly the fund? And if they were, what would you say would be the pros and cons of both of those?
The fund option used to be a lot more popular for various reasons, but a big contributing factor is now, yes, the minimum is almost twice as much as what the minimum is for property. The other added risk of going down the fund route is that you don't have any guarantees as such, and you've got to be investing into a collection of investments effectively that can go up and down in value. Some people may be aware that the stock markets have not had a particularly good time this year, and if you're not an experienced investor, it can be quite nerve-wracking to see what could be your life savings jumping up and down in value over the 5 years. There are some venture capital funds which again have their own inherent risks as well. But on a plus side, you can make some good returns. It's the age-old conundrum of kind of risk to reward. Depending on what Portuguese fund you invest into, you can ultimately choose what risk that you take, the kind of returns you would generally expect. But yeah, you'd have to have a bit more confidence in your investing ability, or in our ability for that matter, in order to take a bit of a leap of faith into something that you can't touch and feel. Naturally, I think since we're young kids, we're kind of taught to buy property. Most of our clients have owned a property and they're more confident with being able to go and see the property. Not to mention, you get generally 2 to 6 weeks to go on holiday in the property that you buy. So you don't get that out of a property fund, unfortunately. You just get the kind of paper to look at, which isn't quite as fun. But yeah, there's pros and cons. You can make more money going down the property fund option, dependent on market permitting. But for the majority of our clients, it's not. They don't want that added risk of going into variable funds, rather the guarantees of buybacks and property that they can kind of touch and feel.
I guess it's easier with the property, the physical property fund, to work out exactly how much you're going to put in and how much the whole experience is going to cost you and what you're going to get back in return once you get to the point of obtaining citizenship. Whereas the other one really is, like you say, much more of a risk, but potentially more of a reward. So it's interesting that I guess it appeals to two different types of people.
It does, and it applies to very few people this year, James. It really does. The Portuguese fund route, last year was a lot more in conversation, but now if when we kind of say, look, here's option A and option B, here's one where you get to stay in it and you can enjoy it. It's near the beach, it's 280, and it's guaranteed to be sold back at the same price compared to the investment fund, which should go up by X amount based on previous experience, and it's 500,000. And you have to pay for your holidays whilst you're in Portugal.
Yeah.
It generally doesn't excite people as much as maybe it did do a couple of years back.
Yes, exactly. And the coming on holidays to Portugal is a requirement of the golden visa. So it is something to think about, because you do have to spend that minimum amount of time to maintain your residency here.
You do indeed. And again, depending on which investment route you take, James, I mean, the hotel share, for example, if you do the hotel share at 280, part of the incentives from the developer is that you can stay in any of their hotels in Portugal. So rather than staying in the same development every year for 5 years, you can have a week in Porto, a week in Lisbon, a week in the Algarve,
Okay.
a couple of scattered around elsewhere in the meantime. Whereas if you buy an apartment, depending which hotel apartment that you buy into, you often find that you've got so much time to stay in your apartment, which is not a bad thing. Because some of them are very nice apartments, but again, this is all part of the decision process when working out which route to take.
Okay, so it depends a little bit whether you're thinking I want an annual holiday in, or in sort of somewhere by the beach perhaps, or somewhere, you know, somewhere where you feel like you're going to be able to come every year, or the option of being able to explore Portugal. And there's certainly a lot of interesting places in Portugal that are worth exploring.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so it's almost like a tick box exercise. Do you need this? Do you need this? Do you need this? And then we'll show the options that tick those boxes.
So getting back to the hotel questions, then, looking at the different hotels that come up, some of them seem to be operational or very close to the point of operational, and other ones seem to be in the redevelopment stage, and you're putting your money in there. So as a little confused about why that is. Is it possible to invest in one that's already up and running, and would you or that's gone through, say, the redevelopment stage? And do you have any recommendations for people when choosing between the two of those?
Indeed, there are different options. So the short answer is there are just different developments in different stages of redevelopment process. So you can buy into some in the very early stages where there has literally been a plot of land purchased, and they're looking to take bookings as kind of looking for a collection of investors, for example, at an early stage. Or you can buy through a hotel which is on booking.com. For example, there's a great development in Alvor. You might have seen the video on YouTube I did a few months back around Alvor, and there is a development there where you can buy 2 studio apartments for 280,000, and it's in a hotel which is going through a full refurbishment. It's just closed actually this week to start the refurbishment, but it is on booking.com. It's a 4-star hotel that up until literally this week has been fully operational, that you can go and view and see and again touch and feel. So you know it's definitely going to be built, but over the next 12 months is being fully refurbished up to a very high standard. So that's one end. Yeah, you can buy with something already built. There's another great development towards Lisbon, which is on a PGA golf course. It's a 5-star golf and spa resort. Capital is slightly higher than the 280 that's needed, but again, you can stay in it this evening. It's there and ready to go. There's a development in Lagos in the Algarve that's recently sold out. That was built off plan right on Lagos Marina, literally first line in Lagos Marina, which is going to be managed by Hilton Hotel Group. That was a hotel share, which again is off plan. So there isn't much to see just yet, but you get to see the kind of previous developments that the developer has built in Portugal. And there's one in Faro actually at the moment, right next to Faro Airport, which has been built off plan. It's the same developer as the one that was recently sold in Lagos. So yeah, again, nothing there to really see just yet. But with Portugal, with it being one of Portugal's biggest developers, you can get an idea of exactly what it's going to look like from the other hotels that you can stay at.
Okay. You mentioned a little bit earlier shares and owning an apartment, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of what the difference is in that. If I was to buy a share, or if I was to buy a hotel room or an apartment, what are the difference? Is there a difference to me as the person investing in it in terms of what I own, and in terms of what you would recommend someone actually goes for?
Well, the difference between the two, so if we look at the hotel share, first of all, you don't really have a big interest in individual apartments. So you're buying a share of a big development. So you get an equal share of the pools, of the restaurants, of the accommodation, and so on. And when you're buying a share in a hotel, it's often on the basis that it is being built. And when it is completed, the developer or the hotel manager will ensure they will have what's called a mandatory buyback. So at completion, you'll have, as part of your agreement, you'll be forced to sell that share back for the same price once you have your passports. And then that hotel will then be rented out, and it will be the developer at that point which will be responsible for the renting and for the management and upkeep and things like this. In the meantime, it is very much a paper transaction. You on the deeds, you have a share of the hotel deeds. Your name is on there with all the other investors. And quite simply, you sell that share back once you have your permanent residency or the citizenship. But yeah, it's very much a paper transaction. So you don't say, I own apartment number 101, for example. You just have a share in the development. So that's the share route. If you buy an apartment, it's just like buying any other apartment, James, in Portugal. Within reason, it's an apartment that you buy. You have legal counsel. You will be going onto the deeds. You'll be choosing the apartment number, which floor, whether it's a poolside or whether it's a hillside, for example. And you own that apartment. And when you go down that route, you'll often find that there is more potential for investment returns. Not only can there be a rental income paid, but also you'll find that there's an optional buyback as well. So you have a bit of time to think, well, have property prices gone up? Would I be able to sell the property now 4 or 5 years on more than what I bought it for? If so, you would generally keep the apartment and either sell it on the open market, or you can keep it and enjoy the rental income. In some cases, you could move into it if you like. Or if property prices go down over the next 4, 5, 6 years, you still have a get out of jail free card with that contract to sell the property back at the same price as what you paid it for. So yeah, if I was to pick a personal favorite, I would go for the one that you can kind of have both sides of the coin. Have the security of getting the passports and being able to sell it at the same price. But I'd also like to make a profit as well. And to do that, generally, you'd go for the apartment ownership rather than the hotel share.
Okay. And just noticing that a few of them offer incentives such as rental income or discounted rate of IMT or something else along those lines. I guess it would come down to speaking to someone like yourself or doing the maths yourself on the back of an envelope. But how do you choose between the two and decide which one is going to work out better for yourself?
Well, first of all, which one pays the most ultimately? Whether it's a saving in taxes or whether it's a payment of rental income. Which one is more profitable overall? Also, it can make a difference depending on the jurisdiction of where our clients live or a tax resident. It can make an impact on the taxation. For example, in the US, our rental income will be taxable at US rates. So that often is not ideal for American clients. Rather, a deduction of cost would be more tax efficient rather than a rental income. But it varies. It ultimately comes down to our individual client, and we'll explain exactly what is the net return, what is the end of the day figure for both options to help them make an educated decision.
Okay. So you mentioned there just briefly on rental income potentially being taxable in the US. Would it also, if it was a case that it was also taxable in Portugal, are people able to offset the two against each other?
Within reason, I won't get into too much tax advice on this, Bernard James, but the summary of it is that in Portugal, you'll pay a flat rate of tax of 28% on any investment income derived from within 6 years rental income up front, which can be a payment of 150,000 as an upfront payment. So if you have that, you have, sorry if I've got a bad connection, James, hopefully you can hear me okay, but it can attract at least 28% tax in Portugal. But if again, in certain countries in the world, there is a higher tax to pay. So you won't be taxed in both countries, but there may be an even higher tax to pay depending on where you are a citizen of or a tax resident of at the moment. So these are important factors that we will guide our clients on before they make a decision.
Okay. And just getting on to another question on choosing which investment to go to. I think one thing that I was trying to work out was how to, all these names of different companies. Sometimes I recognize the names if they're opening a particular brand of hotel, but I don't necessarily know anything about the developers that are involved in the process. And I guess my question is, how do you do due diligence on the different companies that are involved in this, and is your investment protected, or to what extent is it protected, and what would happen in the event that a developer went bust?
Well, this is one key difference, James, between Holborn and certain golden visa companies out there. The real kind of peace of mind that you can take with Holborn is that first and foremost, we are a substantial wealth management company in an industry where reputation is paramount. It only takes one or two bad reviews these days to completely ruin a reputation. So with $3 billion under management, before we recommend or even show any kind of investment options to our clients, we ensure that we complete our due diligence as if it is our money and we are purchasing into these different options. Because should a developer let our clients down, if the buyback wasn't in place, or if they didn't have the finances to honour the contract or anything along these lines, these horror stories, it is our name that is on the tin. So we do an extensive amount of due diligence before we talk about anything. I'm very proud to say, James, we have a 100% conversion rate, success rate on our applications, and that is a big part of why. So when buying with our assistance, you can take a bit of peace of mind that we're already there. We've already done that due diligence to save you having to become a lawyer overnight and having to really examine all the contract. Naturally, you will have a lawyer as well. You will have legal. So as you would with any property purchase, again, making sure that the contracts are concrete and there is the financial backing to make sure that the developer can honour them. We, James, don't work with any developer. Okay, we from our side, we work with a handful of reputable and sizable companies that have a good track record, better than that, a great track record, if not a flawless track record with previous developments, and also looking at their books and their accounts to make sure that they have the ability to deliver what it is that they're promising. So, yeah, like I say, I think our reviews and our reputation, James, and very impressive success rate of 100% speaks volumes on.
Okay. Well, getting down to costs then, because I know people will see the 280 or 350 figure, and they'll be trying to work out, what other costs are involved. And obviously there's the golden visa fees specifically as well. But I was also wondering, do people need to factor in things like property taxes or VAT, management costs if it's being rented out or owned by something else, or finally if they go to sell, capital gains tax?
Okay, yeah, we'll start at the top.
A few there for you.
So,
I can repeat them if you need. Yeah.
It's fine. So property taxes, first of all. So by default, yes, you do pay property taxes when you're buying a property in Portugal. However, certainly when we're looking at the more cost-effective ways to golden visa at the 280, we try to design very low-cost options, and that often comprises of the low entry point, 280,000. But also we're looking for the developer to minimise other costs involved as well. It's very popular with the hotel share route, where more often than not, the developer will pay for all of the property and transfer taxes as part of the incentive, which generally will save in the region of 20 to 25,000 euros in taxes, because it can be there are taxes involved generally. So that is not always applicable. However, if you don't have that incentive, then yes, you would expect to pay taxes on top of property price. As far as the things like management costs, again, it comes down to the development. Where you have a development that's offering to pay a rental income up front, we talked about before, it's all built into the incentive, so there's no deduction. They basically say, look, we will pay you 5 or 6 years rental income up front, so you can reduce the cost of the investment, and you leave everything else with us. Okay, they do the management, they take care of the property, they manage the upkeep and so on, and there's nothing else involved. You literally don't care what happens after that point, because you have nothing to do with it. Of course, you can go and stay in it, but as far as the management and the upkeep, it's entirely catered for. So there's no management fees, and there's no further deductions on what's been agreed to be paid up front. After the 5 years, you'll generally find the incentives period is until the passports are granted. So after that time, you can find that there may be rental costs. So if you do keep it, if there is the option to keep it and you want to then rent it out to the general public, you will generally pay for a management company to do that. And you'll have somebody to do the check-in with your tenants, show them around, show them how the TV works, and make sure that it stays in good condition as well. And yes, you would expect to pay a fee for that. And depending on which managing agent that you choose, the cost of that can vary. But generally speaking, you would expect that if it's fully managed and completely hands off, you would keep around anywhere between 40 to 60% of the rental income, and you just kind of pass the keys to the managing agent, and they'll generally pay that into your account each month or each quarter, which is super. Capital gains tax you mentioned as well. So capital gains tax, you don't pay capital gains tax on your primary residence in Portugal. So a little bit of a grey area on this one, because again, last year, if we're talking about a property that is to live in as a residential investment, if you came to sell that for a profit, and then you purchased another residential home to live in within a certain time frame, you're not going to be paying any tax on the profits. However, this time round, you're not buying it as your main residence. Therefore, if you do come to sell it for a profit, you can expect to pay capital gains tax. It's not the only good thing about paying tax, James, is it means that you've made a profit. But unfortunately, if you do, you'll have some to pay. But often, these things are also, the sale is executed by buyback. So quite often, at the outset, you're selling it back for the same price. You've not made a profit. And in that occasion, in that event, you wouldn't pay any capital gains tax because there's no profit. So there may be some tax to pay on the rental income if there is a rental income paid. But yes, you'll only pay capital gains tax on the basis that you've sold it for a profit. And it's certainly something to factor in if you are looking to sell it on the open market after the passports.
Okay, and then just on other sort of tax you might be paying, I guess if there is rental income or there is dividends, it sounds like you could be paying some rental income on that.
So say that again, sorry, James.
So it sounds like if there is rental income generated by the property, that you would have to pay tax of some kind on that over the 5 years or so.
Correct. Well, you pay generally. Again, I'm talking quite generically because it can vary depending on the development. But if a rental income is paid up front, so lump sum, you'll generally find that the tax will also be paid up front. And for example, if you had 125,000 paid from the developer as an upfront rental payment, you'd have around about 94,000 physically put into your bank account or deducted from the cost after the Portuguese tax has been accounted for.
Okay. And so I wanted to get onto buybacks as well, because I think for a lot of people doing this, they will be thinking about, taking advantage of that. And once that they have the citizenship or permanent residency organized. So I was just wondering, first of all, who actually buys the property back?
There is, again, on the development, more often than not, James, you'll find that the properties, it's actually, I shouldn't use the word buyback, really, because often it's not a buyback, it's actually a forward contract. And
Okay.
there's a separate agreement in place, often with a property fund, for example. With one or two developments that come to mind, the forward contract is actually with a property group or the owner of a large property investment fund who have kind of allocated the properties as a long-term income generator for the fund. So they say, look, we'd love to buy the properties back in 5 years' time because for our portfolio, we'd like that income that's being paid from the holidaymakers going into the profits of our fund. So that's a very typical example. Often it can be with the developer. Again, if we're doing a hotel share, they may simply just want it back. They might want the share back, ready to then for the hotel to be managed by a certain hotel chain. So yeah, at the time, once we've kind of established which investment route is preferred, we can then look on a separate discussion around what is the contract for the buyback, who is it with, who are they, and so on, and how substantial is this contract.
Okay. And I see the words, or two different sort of phrases at least come up on this, which is optional buyback and guaranteed buyback. And I was just wondering if you could explain what the difference is between the two of those, or if there are other similar terms as well, what they might be.
Yeah, fine. No, they're pretty much the only phrases I can think of, James. Optional or mandatory buyback. So depending on the investment, first of all, to have a buyback is a great thing. A buyback or a forward contract is basically saying you've got a guaranteed sale. In a worst case scenario, you can sell the property for what you purchased it for, which is very reassuring, especially if you're buying from abroad. You have no idea about the Portuguese property market. To have a contract with a big property fund, for example, with a big developer to say, worst case scenario, we will take it off your hands for what you bought it for, is a great thing to have. So if you can find a golden visa investment with an option of a buyback, it's not a bad thing. It's good to have that worst case scenario. But you then have to, if it does have a buyback, you'll find it's either mandatory or it is optional. And with a mandatory buyback, James, it means that you don't have a choice. You have to sell it back. So as soon as the passports or your permanent residence has been granted, there will be a clause in the contract to ensure that you sell the share, more often than not, or sell the property back at the same price. And that's a mandatory buyback. So there's no option to keep it, no option to move out, there's no option to move into it, and there's no option to rent it. You just say, thank you for my passports. There you go, you can have it back. And then that's when you can go and buy the property to live in. That's when you can then look for your dream home. Once you've got the passport, you then can buy wherever you wish without any restrictions. An optional buyback, however, is it's exactly what it says in the tin. You have the option to sell it back or to keep it. So after the 4th year, James, the developments that offer this clause is they'll say, right, do you want us to buy it back, or do you want to keep it? And then after 4 years, you will have a chance to look at the property prices in Portugal and work out, does it make sense to keep it, or do we just sell it back as what we agreed before? If you think property prices are not as strong as they were, and you think, no, I'm going to take that up, I'm going to take that offer of what I bought it for, you can do that. And then after the passports have been granted, that's what will happen. If prices have gone up, they've gone up now. They went up 14% last year, James, in Portugal, and they've averaged 7% every year for the past decade. Personally, I don't see any kind of lack of activity that would cause a slowdown. Hopefully, I don't regret saying that, but at the moment, it seems like prices are set to continue to rise. And with that in mind, if we have another 5 years like the last 5 years, the chances are you're going to want to keep it. You're going to want to, or at least sell it on the open market, if not keep it, so that you can make a profit on that sale, which would trigger the capital gains tax, as we said before, but still a profit nonetheless. Or you may rent it. If it has a strong rental income, it might be a great source of income. Or and again, with some developments, you have the option to move there. If you've found a good investment that you've kind of chosen to retire to in the future, you can do that as well, rather than being forced to sell it back at a certain time.
And when you do sell it, say on the open market, what sort of person is buying it? Is it someone else who's coming in then at the golden visa, looking for the golden visa thing like you did, or is it an investor that's looking for some sort of holiday rental that generates some sort of income?
Well, it may be sold under golden visa rules, but I would probably say it's quite a fair assumption that it probably wouldn't be at that time. 5 years from now, I'd be very surprised if the golden visa is still available. As we talked about before with the Prime Minister and his recent announcement. So no, you probably wouldn't be selling it to somebody looking for the golden visa. You'd be selling it as an investment. You'd be selling it just as any other apartment that has the tourism demand for a rental income. And this is again a factor why it's important to buy in a touristic area, so that you have that rental. If you do get down the residential route in the future, and there isn't the option to have any tourism, it's very difficult to maintain the value for something anymore. But if, regardless of golden visa rules at the time, if you've got a property generating 6, 7, 8, 10% per year, you're always going to have that ability to sell it as investment. So yeah, again, important to assess what rental income it can drive at the outset.
Okay. And then in terms of potential delays to a property getting renovated or going through the construction, we've had I guess you mightn't have thought about it beforehand, but just in the past few years we've had things like the pandemic, which has thrown everybody's plans into disarray for at least a little while. Supposing that someone had gone through this process, and then the hotel wasn't able to start the renovation process for a couple of months longer, or potentially even a year or two longer, would that affect their timeline for getting a passport?
It's not. It's something that would be very unlikely to occur. Possible. I mean, for example, before we market it, we need to have a clear understanding of when the development is going to be done, and we need to be able to reassure our clients that it's going to be done in time. But even if there was a delay, we've got at least a 5-year timeline in order for that to be completed. And more often than not, once we launch a development, the renovation is due to be done within 6 to 12 months from the point of sale, given at least again a 4-year timeline in order for that to be completed. So it's never come up, in all honesty, James. It's never come up. I would also need to check as well whether or not the refurbishment needs to be completed, which I've got a funny feeling it doesn't. Even if there was a delay, I'm quite confident that it would still be okay for that passport, because the ownership is still done at the outset. The registration and the deeds is still done at the outset on a property that is going through the refurbishment. So yeah, I'll probably say I'll double check that one before kind of confirming for sure. But yeah, it's not come up, and we would be able to work around it if there was a problem like that.
Okay. And then finally, in terms of I understand at the 5-year mark, you are eligible to apply for permanent residency and apply for Portuguese citizenship. Do you need to, I assume you need to hold your investment until that point. Do you need to hold it any longer than that point, like while you go through the citizenship application process?
It needs to be, well, once you have your passports, James, or the permanent residency. I say the two, by the way. For some countries, you don't want to go for the second passport, or maybe it's not allowed with your current citizenship. So instead, we would do a permanent residency application as opposed to a citizenship application. But either or, once that's applied for, especially once it's completed, there is no requirement, there is no renewal needed,
Okay.
there is no requirements to continue owning that property. So you would only do that if you felt it was the right thing to do for your own personal gain, as opposed to the requirements.
Okay.
The idea is, James, that for the first 5 years, whilst until you get to that point, we want to be just getting a solid investment that hopefully make some good money. But first and foremost, it is secure and it qualifies for the visa, and it will suffice through the golden visa renewals at year 2 and year 4. And it's, like I said before, it's quite an emotionless transaction. It is an investment, so there are certain things to bear in mind. Thinking with your head rather than your heart. But after you have your passports, you can forget about it. That's when the fun begins. You can get your cash back, and that's when you can start house shopping for the dream home without worrying about where it is or what the price is going to be. So yeah, from that point you're free to relax and enjoy Portugal. Or enjoy about your investment.
Well, thank you. That answers a lot of questions that I had about this specific way of investing in the golden visa. I think, we talked about this before. There's a minimal amount of information about this online. There's certainly the headlines that you can get the golden visa through this route, but it's not really been explained in any great detail, and these questions haven't really been answered. So thank you very much for taking the time to answer them for people who read the Portugalist website and watch our videos. I think everybody will really appreciate this, and I think we'll hopefully get some good feedback from people.
Yeah, great. And once again, I apologise for the poor attempt of a mustache, James. But yeah, hope there was some good information. But yeah, for any questions that I've not covered around timelines or different investment options, everyone is welcome to drop me an email or drop yourself an email. You can just correspond with me by all means. And yeah, if there's any one-to-one consultations to be done, yeah, I can just send out a link to my diary to book that in.
So you, when people get into contact with you, and I'll put a link or an email address to make that possible for people, but you will then give people a call, right? You will discuss what the different options are and explain all of this information that you've just given us, but on a more personal level for whoever you're speaking to.
Yeah, when we're generally, James, the easiest way is I can share some slides on a Zoom call or Microsoft Teams, for example. And yeah, we'll talk through the process. So what does the golden visa process look like? Where does it start? Do you meet the requirements? What are the timeframes involved? Who are the people that are involved? So that you have a good understanding of what it's going to look like. Then we'll go through the different investment options available in Portugal at the moment and discuss whether or not property is the right route or another route. And we talk through the different incentives that we go through. We find the property, and then yeah, you have myself, you have my team here at Holborn to then help with the administration. We make it's quite a difficult process, if I'm being brutally honest, James, to get everything through from start to finish. But that's what we do. The only kind of real time we need our clients to visit Portugal is when they need their the biometrics, the fingerprints, and the eye scan and so forth, and they can be accompanied for that. But other than that, we do the full process. So first part is just going to get the facts. I'd encourage everybody to get the facts sooner rather than later. There's no kind of immediate panic with the announcement from the Prime Minister last week. But in a worst case scenario, we might find that applications must be submitted by the middle of next year. You've got to be mindful that to submit an application that you have to own the property, and the property purchase can take 4 to 5 months. So you can do the maths on that as to kind of, in a worst case scenario, there is an element of urgency now. But yeah, first thing is get the facts, understand how it all works, and then yeah, if you'd like to work with us, we'll get that through as hopefully as swiftly and as smoothly as we can.
Okay. And I guess one of the other benefits of working with you being global, is that you have that knowledge about other countries as well. I have a particular bias towards Portugal, obviously, but in the event that that this golden visa ends in Portugal, or that there's another country that's more suitable to people, you can talk them through the options there as well.
Yeah, I am talking exclusively about Portugal, which yeah, I'm also slightly biased towards as well, James. But yeah, it is the citizenship program is very much global, so it's not just Portugal. We can discuss Spain, we can talk Grenada, we can talk St. Kitts, Malta. People move countries for different reasons. It might not be just Portugal that they wish to explore, but yeah, we have experts all over the world. We have 20 offices globally, and we're trying to have 100 different countries, James. So between myself and our team, I'm sure that we can add some value.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, Jason, for talking us through all of this information, which, as I mentioned, I haven't really seen in great detail out there. So I really appreciate getting to learn about it. I'm sure everyone else does. And if people have any more questions for you, then I will give them the details so that they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, perfect. Yep. Thanks, James. Good to chat with you again.
Thank you so much.
Speak to you soon. Thanks, James.
Speak soon. Bye.